He was just 24 years old. But on a cold night in April 1945, Major Anders Lassen found himself crawling through the mud of northern Italy, leading a small unit of commandos into the teeth of a German stronghold. Their orders were simple: neutralize enemy positions near Lake Comacchio to prepare for the Allied advance. But the reality? They were outnumbered, outgunned, and facing a fortified line defended by machine guns, mortars, and tanks. Yet Lassen didn't hesitate. When his men were pinned down, he sprinted forward alone, hurling grenades and cutting down gun crews in a blur of motion. When bullets tore through his body, he refused to fall back. He reloaded, limped toward the final bunker, and gave his men one last command: keep going. Moments later, Anders Lassen fell. His final act shattered the German defenses and saved every man under his command. He was posthumously awarded the Victoria Cross, Britain's highest military honor for valor, and he remains the only non-Commonwealth soldier in World War II to receive it. But almost nobody today knows his name. This is the forgotten story of the Danish aristocrat who became one of Britain's most lethal commandos, a man whose courage defied reason and whose death defined heroism. Anders Lassen was born in 1920 in Denmark, into privilege. He grew up on a countryside estate surrounded by rolling fields and the quiet hum of an upper-class life. His father was a successful businessman. His family was wealthy. There was no hardship, no desperation. But young Anders was restless. He wasn't content with comfort. He craved challenge. Even as a boy, he was impulsive, daring, and famously stubborn. Teachers described him as a born leader, but impossible to control. When Germany invaded Denmark in April 1940, Anders was just 19. He watched as Nazi troops rolled through Copenhagen with barely a fight. His country surrendered within hours. It was humiliation. And for Anders Lassen, it was personal. He couldn't accept that Denmark, his home, would submit so easily. So, he made a choice that would change his life forever. He escaped Denmark by sea, in a small fishing boat bound for neutral Sweden. From there, he made his way to Britain, determined to fight. Most would have called it madness. A teenager from a conquered country, volunteering to join the most dangerous fighting force in the world. But for Lassen, it wasn't madness. It was duty. By 1941, Lassen had joined the British Commandos, a new kind of unit born out of desperation after Dunkirk. These weren't traditional soldiers. They were raiders, saboteurs, masters of infiltration. Their job wasn't to fight fair. It was to strike fast, disappear, and terrify the enemy. Anders Lassen thrived. He wasn't the biggest man in the unit, but he was fast, precise, and fearless. He had a talent for improvisation and a strange calm in chaos. One officer described him as the kind of man who smiled when others froze. Soon, Lassen was selected for an elite detachment, the Special Boat Section, later known as the SBS. Their missions were top secret. Small teams operating behind enemy lines, often by sea, attacking targets in occupied Europe and North Africa. Training was brutal. Endurance runs through icy surf. Navigation by stars. Silent landings under moonlight. But Lassen didn't just survive it, he excelled. He'd found his element. By 1942, he was raiding enemy ships along the Greek coast, blowing up supply depots, sabotaging ports under cover of night. In one operation, his boat was ambushed by an Italian patrol. Instead of retreating, Lassen charged the enemy vessel with his machine gun blazing, killing the crew and taking prisoners. His commander called him a natural-born warrior. London called him something else, a problem, because Lassen had one flaw: he didn't follow rules. Lassen was adored by his men, but notorious with his superiors. He was insubordinate, reckless, and sometimes dangerously impulsive. He once got into a fist fight with an officer who questioned his tactics. Another time, he disappeared from base for 3 days, only to return with intelligence on an enemy outpost he'd scouted entirely on his own. In a formal British military structure, this kind of behavior was unacceptable. But in the commandos, it was invaluable. Because when you're operating deep behind enemy lines, discipline alone doesn't win battles. Instinct does. Lassen's instinct was unmatched. He could read terrain, anticipate enemy movements, and move silently like a shadow. He became a man commanders called when missions were impossible. And impossible was exactly what came next. By 1943, Lassen and his small team of commandos were wreaking havoc across the Mediterranean. They attacked airfields in Crete, sabotaged railways in Italy, and destroyed supply convoys feeding Rommel's army in North Africa. One report described Lassen's tactics as controlled chaos. He'd attack from unexpected directions, vanish into the sea, and reappear miles away to strike again. During one mission, he and 8 men destroyed a German fuel depot, captured 20 prisoners, and escaped without a single casualty. He was awarded the Military Cross for bravery, the first of 3, but honors meant little to Lassen. He wasn't chasing medals. He was chasing impact, and deep down, he knew something most soldiers never admitted. He wasn't afraid to die. By 1944, Lassen had become a legend within the Special Boat Service. But legends come with a cost. His friends were dying, one after another. He'd lost comrades in Crete, Corsica, and the Aegean. He began to carry himself differently. Still fearless, still confident, but quieter. There's a story from this time. After a brutal raid in the Greek islands, Lassen sat by the shore at sunrise, staring out at the sea. A younger commando asked him if he ever got scared. Lassen didn't answer immediately. Then he said quietly, "You don't stop being afraid. You just stop letting it matter." It's a haunting line, and it perfectly captured who he'd become. He wasn't driven by hatred or revenge. He was driven by principle. He believed evil should be confronted, no matter the cost. That belief would soon lead him into the final chapter of his life. April 8th, 1945, northern Italy. The war in Europe was nearing its end, but the Germans were still fighting fiercely across the Po Valley. Lassen's unit, 9 Troop, 43rd Royal Marine Commando, was tasked with clearing a series of enemy machine gun posts guarding the eastern shore of Lake Macchio. Their objective: capture the spit of land so the Allies could advance north. The terrain was a nightmare: mud, reeds, and open fields. Perfect ground for machine guns. As the commandos advanced, they came under heavy fire, pinned down by 3 enemy posts in concrete bunkers. Lassen crawled forward through the marsh, under fire so intense it shredded the reeds above him. He reached the first bunker, pulled the pin on a grenade, and eliminated the entire crew. Then he sprinted toward the second position, firing his Sten gun as he ran. Bullets tore through his shoulder, but he didn't stop. He cleared the second bunker, regrouped his men, and pointed to the third. It was the strongest, reinforced concrete, with a tank turret mounted on top. His men hesitated. Lassen didn't. He moved forward alone. A burst of fire hit him again. He fell to one knee, then stood back up, and kept going. He reached the final bunker and threw his last grenade, destroying the position. But as he turned, a final shot struck him in the chest. He fell to the ground, mortally wounded. His men rushed to him, but he waved them off. "Keep going," he said, and they did. They captured the objective, and over 200 German soldiers surrendered. Lassen died within minutes. When word of his actions reached London, his commanding officer submitted him for the Victoria Cross. The citation read, "By his magnificent leadership and complete disregard for his own safety, Major Lassen enabled his troop to reach its objective. His courage and self-sacrifice were beyond praise." He became the only non-Commonwealth officer in World War II to receive the award. But his family never saw him return home. In Denmark, he was hailed as a national hero. But for decades, his story was overshadowed by larger events: Normandy, Berlin, Hiroshima. It wasn't until historians revisited the archives of the SBS that his name resurfaced, and his reputation as one of the bravest men of the war was restored. Today, Major Anders Lassen's grave lies in Argenta Gap, War Cemetery, Italy. Rows of white headstones stretch out in quiet symmetry. His reads simply, Major A. Lassen, VC, MC in 2 bars, SBS. No grand epitaph, no self-importance, just a record of impossible courage. The Special Boat Service still honors him as one of its founding legends. Recruits learn his story during training, not as history, but as a standard. Because Lassen's life raises a timeless question. What drives a person to charge toward danger when every instinct says to run? For Lassen, it wasn't glory. It wasn't medals. It was conviction. He believed that freedom, any freedom, was worth fighting for. And maybe that's why his story endures. Because it reminds us that courage isn't the absence of fear. It's doing what's right, even when you know you might not survive. In the chaos of war, some men become symbols. Anders Lassen didn't seek to be one. He simply refused to let others suffer while he stood still. From the estates of Denmark to the marshes of Italy, he left behind a trail of impossible victories and one final act of selflessness that turned him into a legend. He fought for a country that wasn't his own and died for a cause that belonged to all of us. As the world moved on, his name faded from the headlines. But among those who serve and those who remember, Anders Lassen's courage still echoes. Because sometimes history doesn't remember the loudest voices. It remembers the bravest hearts. This was the story of Major Anders Lassen, the man who held off a tank battalion alone and never came home. If you found this story powerful, please leave a like to honor the legacy of men like Lassen. And if you love deep, human stories of courage, sacrifice, and the forgotten heroes of history, subscribe for more.